Hello everyone, it's Rosin, and welcome to another Bran awareness vlog. I figured I would do another Q&A video, because I haven't done one in about a year. A little more, a little less. I'm pretty sure the last one I did was sometime mid-2018 or so. But yeah, they're fun, and I had the place to myself, so I figured, why the fuck not? So I put the call out on Twitter and on YouTube's community tab, which, as a side note, I'm using that a lot more these days for updates and stuff. Really good feature, one of the few recent YouTube additions I actually like instead of actively dislike. So there's that. But yeah, as a side note to the side note, I guess there's a lot of like people commenting these days. Well, I guess not a lot, but I've noticed at least a couple the past few months saying that their stuff just isn't showing up as regularly in their subscription stuff anymore, and that's not like anything to do with my upload schedule. Just like straight up, people don't seem to be getting a lot of my videos in their subfeed anymore. So I don't know what the deal with that is, but YouTube's weird and broken in a lot of weird and mysterious ways that I'll never understand, and I'm just gonna have to deal with that, so whatever. But yeah, make it an effort, I guess, if you want to keep up with my stuff to, well, I guess Twitter is usually better for that, but if you don't want to follow me on Twitter, the other place to do that is just peek at that community tab every now and again, because I may have posted something in there about, plans moving forward and stuff, but yeah, enough about all that preamble nonsense. Let's get on with the questions. I put the call out around July 3rd, and I planned on recording that night, and then sure enough, as soon as I start recording, about 2 minutes in, massive fireworks start in the neighborhood, and I just could not. And then July 4th and 5th, I was really busy, hanging out with friends, catching up with people, going on dates. I saw Spider-Man, good movie, and yeah, it was just a busy time. So now we're here the morning of the 6th. It's like 6:45 a.m., bright and early, and I'm here to answer some questions for y'all. So, first one is on Twitter. It's from at JigglyPurrin, who is asking, when's SMT 5? Now, frankly, I don't know, and I'm honestly at a point where I'm not sure if I really care. Yeah, Atlas has kind of lost me as of late, and I don't want to make this like a huge fucking tirade, but like, I just want to be honest with y'all. Like, Atlas's recent stuff, I feel like, has really started to gone downhill in quality in a lot of ways, and I feel like a lot of the interesting themes and ideas that they used to present in their games have started to become slowly sanded down over time and just made more palatable for a wider audience, but as a result also becoming more generic and a little less impactful, at least for me personally. SMT4A, while I like that game a lot, and I really like a lot of what it goes for, really felt like it struggled with trying to get out of the mainline SMT formula, but by doing so, it just kind of became like a generic shonen anime type story thing, which I didn't super care for that direction, even though I otherwise really like that game and there's stuff about it I like a lot. I do think the story and the overall writing quality was worse than SMT4's. And then Persona 5, I just think, has a dire lack of creativity, and truth be told, I just could not give enough of a shit about the cast, because it, like, the entire main party of that game felt almost like focus tested in a way where, like, it felt like they took the successful stuff that people really liked about the characters from Persona 3 and Persona 4 and, like, mushed them together in this really, like, really sterilized scientific way to create, like, characters that just seem to be made for widespread appeal and not so much as like actual interesting characters, at least to me. And it just felt very artificial to me in a very weird way. Like, on paper, I think Persona 5 is probably the best like Persona game, but also I feel like it really lacks the heart and the charisma and the charm that I got from 3 and 4. So I don't know. Frankly, I didn't even finish Persona 5. I got about halfway through, and I just could not. I just couldn't anymore. I got so bored. And also, it's just a very long and bloated game. Even, like, Persona 3 and Persona 4 were already kind of stretching it for me in terms of pacing and kind of starting to feel like they were maybe overstaying their welcome by the time they ended. Persona 5 just, I'm sorry, it's so bloated and slow in so many ways. And I just ended up watching a playthrough for the rest of it because I was like, I just don't give enough of a fuck, and I looked up all the S-links, and I just experienced the rest of the game that way, and I'm comfortable with admitting that, because otherwise I probably would have just dropped it, so, and no offense to people who like Persona 5 or anything, but I just felt it was really kind of phoned in a way, despite really liking the aesthetics and gameplay of that game. I just really felt like the writing took a sharp step back. And I'm kind of just feeling that way about Atlas in general these days. Like their current business strategy seems to be to just re-release their big hits with like these new mysterious girl characters that are like suddenly integral to the plot and feels really attention grabby and like marketing in like a really, I don't know, kind of weird way that just kind of off puts me these days. And I just I'm not in love with the studio and the development as much as I used to be with their older games, and that pains me to say that, but it's just kind of the truth, and I want to be honest with y'all. Like SMT5, I am like curious about where they take it, but I would be lying if I said I'm actually really looking forward to the game, because I'm not really convinced with the information I have now that they're gonna pull it off. I'm worried that they're just gonna go back to basics and start to repeat the formula. But I'm also worried if they try to break that formula, I'm also worried that they're just gonna make something that's a little less interesting and a little more generic, and I kind of hope that they manage to avoid that. So we'll see. I'm open to anything. I want to keep an open mind going into something, and I'm sure I'll play it at some point. It might not be a day one for me. But also part of it is just we don't know enough about it. Like it was announced way too early. That was obvious. And we just don't know shit. So it's hard to get excited about something that's like a vague idea and not really something that we know a lot about. Because they have to like re-release Catherine and re-release Persona 5 and release a bunch of Persona 5 spin-offs and shit before we can even get to anything different. And like even like that fantasy game that they're doing, like I don't know, maybe that's a cool thing, but also like it's hard for me to get excited about that until I really know what the fuck that is either. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the current state of Atlas stuff. And I hope they can win me back at some point, but I'd be lying if I said I was super excited for their future stuff. So sorry if that was a little bit of a bummer for some people. But Ultimate Trainer asks, have you ever been to a convention? If so, what was the worst experience you had there? Okay, so I had to pause the recording so I could do some serious Googling to find out what the fuck this even was, because it's been so long, and I barely remember it because I was a kid at the time. And also, this was, to be frank, this was part of like this was a period of my life which was pretty traumatic, so like there's just a lot of memories and stuff that was from this time period that I've kind of blocked out in general. So I don't think about this often. But I was about to answer this question by saying no, I've never been to a convention, which is something that I'm pretty sure I've said in public and on Twitter and stuff numerous times, but technically it's not true, though I don't even know if this technically counts as a convention, but I'm going to say it does anyways for the sake of this. So, when I was 12, which would have been, or rather, I was just turning 12 because it was in October of 2005 and it relates to my birthday. We were going down to Chicago for a family trip, and I was going to get out of school for like a week because of this. And if I remember correctly, it was because we were having this huge extended family like get together in the Chicago area. And it was around the time of my birthday. It was technically a little bit after my birthday, but I think my mom felt bad that like I was getting kind of dragged into this, and like I think she wanted to make sure I had something to do or like something to look forward to. So as part of my birthday that year, instead of getting me like a bunch of like presents and stuff, we ended up going to this like Pokemon convention thing, which according to Bulbapedia happened on October 15th of 2005 and was called Pokemon Rocks America. And was apparently at the Navy Pier in Chicago, which now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was at a pier. That does sound right to me. And it was like a huge big like Pokemon event thing where like they had like, I believe they had like a trading card game tournament. They had like a bunch of different like, not really panels, but I remember them having like projectors with big like video like presentation type stuff. Yeah, even in the Bulbapedia thing, they say like video presentations. And like I remember they had like a bunch of games and stuff. This might be like an inserted memory, and I could be completely wrong about this. If any of you have ever seen that meme image on the internet with the giant inflatable Pikachu that you go inside and it looks like Pikachu has a giant vagina, I am like 90% sure that one of those things was there, because I remember seeing that image way back when and being like, holy shit, I saw that in real life. but also that could be something that like I've re-added to my memory, because also like I said, I don't have great memory of this whole thing. And I remember because my mom took me and also my older sister was there, and I think my older sister got dragged along, because at this point she did not give a fuck about Pokemon. She was too old to like care about that or like stuff like that in general anymore. And frankly, I'm pretty sure I talked to her years later about it. Like, it just kind of came up in a conversation. She was like, "Oh my god, I was so fucking embarrassed to be there," which is funny, but was probably made worse because I definitely remember there was a point where my mom was like, "Okay, fuck this," and then she just like looked to my sister and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna leave for like 2 hours. Just make sure your brother doesn't get in any like trouble or shit," and just totally bailed on us. I think I'm remembering that right. There was definitely points at that event where it was like my sister just kind of like watching me go through and do shit. The two things I remember from that event. Well, actually, I'd say there's four. I remember going in that there was like a group of older kids that were talking about a bunch of like Pokemon they were looking to trade, and I remember that being very impressionable to me as like a young 12-year-old nerd kid, and being like, "Oh wow, you can be older and still care about this stuff and like be cool or whatever." And I think that was like a good lesson for like a young me to learn, I guess. And just being sincere about the stuff you like and all that, especially like I said, like my sister was just like dying to be there, and like, you know, she still obviously doesn't care about nerd shit, and she kind of left a lot of like nerdier type stuff behind in her childhood or whatever. So to have like another like older set of people at that event, just to like look up to and be like, "Oh, okay, like it's okay to like still latch on to stuff like this when you get older," I think was a good experience for me looking back, though I probably didn't recognize it as that at the time. The other thing I remember is I'm pretty sure they had a bunch of like people dressed up in like the Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny outfits that were just like around and like making sure kids weren't getting into trouble and stuff. I don't know why I remember that. The other thing I remember is that they had these giant booths set up, and I remember just really long lines, and I remember waiting forever to be able to do this. Because what you could do is they were giving out those like tickets, and I don't remember what they were called. They were either called like Mystic tickets or Aurora. Were they called Aura tickets or Aurora tickets or something? I don't remember. But basically, they were these special event item things that like. How I remember this happening is they had these machines that staff members would take your Game Boy Advance Pokemon games and they would put them in this machine, and it would give you like this special ticket item in your inventory. And this was for my case, it was for Ruby. I think I brought along my copy of Ruby and my copy of Fire Red. And these tickets would let you board a ship in the post game for both of those games, and then you could go to like these different special islands that you normally couldn't get access to and capture like I think like Lugia and Ho-Oh, and I think in Ruby that's where you got Deoxys. I can't remember exactly. Maybe what's the fuck? What was the name of the thing that was like Celebi in Gen 3, but like it wasn't. I was about to say Sriracha, but that's not the name of it. Was it Jirachi? I think it was Jirachi. I'm sorry. It's been a while for me in the Pokemon thing. But yeah, I remember that was really cool, and I definitely remember because when I got back to school and I got to tell people that I got those tickets, I was like the coolest kid in school for like 2 weeks, and it was great. At least among the people that were like still interested in Pokemon, because like, you know, I think, yeah, like that was the first year of middle school for me, so we're starting to get into that like phase where it's like suddenly like it's not cool to like all that childish shit anymore or whatever. But I was still into the Pokemon thing at that time or whatever, and I know definitely like my group of friends at the time all were and stuff like that. So I remember that being really cool because like I suddenly felt like I was part of this exclusive club or whatever. The other thing I remember, and this ties into the worst experience I had, they had this giant row of demo booths set up for Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Which, actually, let me look up. Gale of Darkness. I don't know if it was out at this point. It was, okay, so it was out in August in Japan, and... Okay, so according to Wikipedia at least, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness came out on October 3rd, 2005. This event was October 15th, so it was about 2 weeks old in America at this time. But they had these giant demo booths set out where you could just like play like a little demo battle of Gale of Darkness. And I remember waiting in line and doing that. And I think at that point, like, my sister was like, all right, he's playing the game. And, like, she tapped me on the shoulder and was like, I'm going to go to the bathroom or something. I can't remember. But I definitely remember, like, zoning out and being, like, left alone just to play this demo. And I remember walking away after I finished the battle. And these people in Nintendo of America shirts came up. With, like, a giant, like an actual, like, goddamn, like, film, like almost like TV news crew style camera, and they're just like, oh, did you play the Pokemon XD demo? And I was like, yeah. And keep in mind, this is like peak like childhood trauma, like socially anxious Bran, like 12 years old, no one, like no adult familiar figure to like get me out of the situation. And they were just like, oh, can we interview you about it? Because what they were doing, I'm pretty sure, is they were looking for people to interview and like do like a highlight reel for like a trailer or do something where they were getting like recorded impressions of the demo, probably so that they could use it for some marketing or something or other. And I remember I recorded this what felt like forever. I'm sure it was no longer than like 5 minutes, but they just recorded this whole like video thing of just me awkwardly looking at the camera. And I remember them being like, so where are you from? And I was like, insert town here, Wisconsin. And they're like, oh, what's your favorite Pokemon? And I was like, Raichu. And just, it was the most awkward like thing of my life. I'm pretty sure it was probably the first time I was ever technically interviewed in my life too, and just being terrified. And I remember my sister finally walking back and like getting like within like eyesight of me and just looking like, what the fuck is going on? And then finally, like, the lady, like, shook my hand or whatever and was like, oh, thank you so much for doing the interview, like, little guy or whatever, and just kind of, like, walked away. And I was like, oh, my God. And then, like, finally our mom caught back up with us or whatever. And, like, they were both confused. And I told the story, like, yeah, the Nintendo people, like, interviewed me after I played the Pokemon demo. And my mom thought this was the coolest fucking thing in the world. I think my sister heard enough of it to, like, realize I was, like, anxious as hell and, like, super awkward and, like, embarrassing. But my mom thought it was the coolest fucking thing ever, and she was like, oh my God, you're gonna be in a commercial. And I'm like, oh God, no. And I remember after we got home, there was like at least a month worth of time where my mom kept going on. I don't even remember if she was like, she probably wasn't even looking at like the right websites, but my mom would go online. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing the more I think about it. My mom would go online and she kept like checking the Pokemon website or the Nintendo website or something. I never really got what she was checking. She might have been checking a fan site for all I know, but she was like, oh, I'm gonna see if they uploaded a video of you. And I was like, I remember being like so embarrassed because I'm like, oh my God, the internet's gonna know I'm like a huge like weirdo. And of course I don't think they ever used that. I think they had the foresight to know like, oh God, this kid's awkward, and they just didn't use it. But I remember being terrified for like a fucking month after that, where I was just like, oh my God, what's happening? But yeah, like looking at this Bulbapedia page, like shit, I'm starting to remember things that like, fuck, like I completely forgot. Like they had a Metang. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But it was like a special event Pokemon that they added to your game that you couldn't get anywhere else, which was super cool. So yeah, that was my convention experience and my awkward experience being interviewed by random Nintendo of America staffer people. Yeah, it was a weird time. Thanks, Ultimate Trader, for giving me an excuse to talk about this weird childhood memory I probably would have no other reason to talk about. Ninto asks, thoughts on 4th of July? Do you enjoy it, or have you maybe not been feeling super patriotic these last few years for some reason? Who knows? How do you usually spend it, and do you have any plans this year? I spent 4th of July this year going basically on a date with a friend. We went to a nearby fair, and then, like, a little bit after we got there, it started downpouring, and I got soaking wet. So then we went back to her place and we just ate good food, watched a couple movies, and I spent the night at her place. And yeah, it was a good, nice, low key way to spend the Fourth, I guess. Normally, what happens is that my family tends to make it a effort to spend a week in Door County whenever 4th of July comes around, but I haven't been doing that with them the past few years, just because usually it doesn't usually gel well with my work schedule, or I just don't want to take the time off. So I've been kind of doing like kind of sporadic plans. Sometimes I just don't really do much at all. Other times, like I get together with friends, kind of like this year. So yeah. But for those of you unfamiliar, Door County is a county in Wisconsin, as you can probably guess by the name. It's the little peninsula part that sticks out into Lake Michigan. It's just a beautiful piece of land. You know, obviously you got a lot of good beaches on the lake there, and yeah, just really really gorgeous scenery out there. So I wish I could go over there more with them, but also like they usually just end up staying longer than I really feel like I want to stay, especially with like how hard it is to justify taking that long of time off of work and stuff like that. It's easier for them just because they are, I don't know, they're just in positions in life where it's easier for them to get away from work, or they're just not working at all in the case of some of them. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. So but yeah, as for the beginning part of the question, I kind of went in reverse order here. Sorry about that. Thoughts on 4th of July? Yeah, I don't know. As I've gotten older and just more politically aware, and frankly just more historically aware, it's gotten really hard for me to be like, fuck yeah, America, nationalism, patriotism, all that type of shit. Because, like, you know, the more I learn, the more it becomes quite apparent that the freedom that America promises is delivered quite unevenly and unfairly. And we have a lot of shit to work out until, like, that can be a thing that we're, like, super prideful about. And frankly, in general, I find, like, nationalism like a really dangerous like thing to get super rah like tough and prideful about, just because, like, you know, that's the type of ideology that leads to like dehumanizing each other and like putting barriers where there probably shouldn't be barriers, and just like it's a bad way of othering other people that just, you know, it becomes the justification for all sorts of atrocities and wars, and it's hard for me to like really give that much of a shit. And frankly, I kind of feel like I'd still feel that way even if I was located in another country. It's just something that I don't tend to really take pride in. Like I said, especially the more I learn about our country's history too, the less impressed I am altogether. So, yeah, not really super patriotic. That's just kind of how the cookie crumbles, I guess. And then also, Silent Protagonist, also on Twitter, asks, what are, in your opinion, the key components to a real robot show or space opera type anime? Well, space opera is like a pretty well-defined thing by this point, and I feel like I don't really have much to add about that one. The real robot label is something that I do have some thoughts on, though. I do get into this a little bit in the Gundam video I'm working on, in the ways that I feel like real robot as a genre and as a name for a genre has caused some misunderstanding for what it's supposed to represent, and can often cause people to go into series such as Gundam with like kind of like a misunderstanding of what it is supposed to be within a greater context of talking about how that term came to be. In the sense that real robot is supposed to kind of denote a difference in attitude from super robot. And not that it's supposed to be like a super grounded and realistic thing. Like, it is more a change in attitude in the sense that the robots or the mecha are not like this glorified thing in and of itself. They are kind of more of like a means to an end. They are treated as vehicles and weapons and tools rather than as like these great godlike beings. And even then, I think there are always going to be examples on the margins that people can point to, like, what about this and what about this? And that's why, in general, I should probably have preceded this by saying I feel like genres and descriptors like real robot or stuff like this are good for giving people a general idea of how what people are getting into when they get into the story. But I also think that they are descriptors that sometimes we as a culture give way too much weight and put too much stock into, to the point where it can sometimes do more harm than good. So, yeah, to me, a real robot show, all that I ever really go in when I hear that term is the expectation that like the mecha is treated as like like a weapon of war or like a tool, and it isn't so much a character in and of itself as it is just a something that another character or characters use to progress through the story or through combat or whatever the fuck else they want to use it for. I'm pretty loose with my definitions like this, just because I don't know. I think just by nature that these are categories that we have constructed so that it is easier for us to talk about these things, but also that's not always a easy solution in and of itself either. So, yeah, I don't know. That probably wasn't super helpful. All right, let's move on to the YouTube community tab. Berries and Cream asks, "What's your favorite type of animal, domesticated or otherwise?" Let me give you a top three. And honestly, depending on the day you ask, this could probably change. But this is how I'm feeling right now. First one, and actually, this first one is probably set in stone. Actually, the more I think about it, I've always really liked mongoose or mongooses. If I remember correctly, the plural for both is accepted. Um, yeah, I don't know. They're just cute. They're ferocious, and they fight snakes and shit. And ever since I was a little kid, I always thought the mongoose was just a cool animal. Second is probably cats. I've owned more dogs in my life than I ever owned cats. I've only owned one cat, but we had a very special bond, that cat and I, that even I don't think I shared with any of the dogs I owned. Even my beautiful little Alaskan Husky Wolf hybrid Goober, who he and I definitely spent a lot of time together, but I don't think we ever got as close as that cat and I did, because the cat didn't really like anyone else in the family. So I was like that cat's like bread and butter friend when it needed a friend. The dog loved everyone equally, so there's a little more of like a shared communal love going on there. But that cat and I were seeing eye to eye and shit. Um, so yeah, and I don't know, just in general, the more I think about it too, the way that cats occupy space and live alongside people, I just find more endearing, and I just think works better with me and my lifestyle better than the more active lifestyle that dogs come with or are associated with, I guess. So yeah, it would be really hard for me to choose. Like, say I decided I wanted to get a pet, I would have a really tough time just deciding if I wanted a cat or a dog. But I think I would probably go with a cat. I love dogs a lot too. Don't get me wrong, but I think I am at this point in my life probably more of a cat person. So yeah. And then the third, this one started kind of ironic, but then became sincere. Ever since my love of The Crow became this weird thing in my life, and like 90s edgelord shit. Yeah, I've actually like started to like learn more about crows as animals, and like those birds are goofy, and I kind of love them, and just they're really bizarre, and I think they're cute. So yeah, I'd say crows are up there too, and just aesthetically speaking, crows are pretty awesome. So yeah, that's my top three: mongoose, cat, crow. Tanya wants to know, can you dance? Oh, fuck no. So yeah, I cannot dance. I do not feel comfortable dancing at all. Funny story, the last girl I dated was actually a I don't want to say professional dancer because it wasn't really her job, but like there were definitely times where she like was part of a dance group and got paid to do stuff. So I mean that counts as professional, I guess, but that wasn't like her main job or anything. Um no, but she loved dance. Like that was her main like hobby thing outside of like nerd stuff. Um it was the thing that she was really into when she was a kid, and then kind of fell out of, I guess, for a while. And then when she got like further along, I think like near adulthood, she got back into it. And for her, it was kind of like a therapeutic thing that it started out as like a way to build confidence. And just kind of like, from what I understand, it was like kind of like a thing that like helped her like own her body and feel comfortable with like her appearance and stuff like that, which is super cool. And that was kind of the thing she always told me going into it, is like the first step to becoming a good dancer is to just own it and like be confident. And my doorbell just rang, so I'm gonna be right back. Sorry, that was just the UPS man who was delivering a box of model kit paint that I had ordered and is now sitting on my shelf. Anyways, back to what I was talking about. But yeah, no, that ex tried getting me into dancing, and the thing that she had told me was the first step to being a good dancer is confidence and just owning it and just like, even if you look goofy or whatever, just accepting it and like doing it and having that drive to like want to look cool and just like accepting yourself for who you are. And as soon as she started talking about that, I was like, fuck no, I can't do this. So we gave up on that pretty fast. Yeah, so I can't dance. Sorry. Barry asks, how about that Lufia 2, huh? Good game or good game, am I right? Lufia 2's pretty good. That's all I have to say about that. It's been probably a decade and a half, even maybe, since I played Lufia 2. I don't know. I definitely played Lufia 2 around the time I discovered Super Nintendo emulation alongside shit like Chrono Trigger and Earthbound. So like it was forever ago, and frankly I don't remember much of that game. But Lufia 2 is pretty fucking good from what I remember. I should maybe revisit that game someday. Sphinx Eater 101 asks, Cathedral of Shadows 2? No. And I feel like my discussion regarding Atlas stuff at the beginning is one explanation as to why. But if you want a really long and detailed explanation about my experience with Cathedral of Shadows as an overall thing, I highly suggest you go back and find a video I made about a year ago that is titled A Very Important Update, A Reflection and a Break, in which I talk about my experience from beginning to end doing Cathedral of Shadows, which I guess I should clarify. A lot of you have joined me since this podcast was a thing on my channel. A lot of you have joined through Drakengard or through Kyuyaku Megami Tensei, or even through the Y2K podcast that I'm now doing, which I'm kind of baffled that, again, there are people that are like finding me through that, but whatever. Shit like that's funny to me. But yeah, the first thing that I did on YouTube that started to get some serious traction was a Megami Tensei fan podcast that frankly is pretty bad if you go back and listen to it. I'm not happy with my performance, but I think that's probably, again, just me being super hard on myself. I was a wide-eyed college student who thought I could take on the world and thought my opinion needed to be fucking heard and shit and whatever. Yeah, it was just a fan podcast me and a friend, Katsu, recorded that went 60-some episodes, and then I just wasn't feeling it anymore, and I said, hey, Katsu, I kind of think I'm kind of done. He's like, well, if you don't want to do it, then I'm not going to force you. Let's just call it quits here. And we did, and I moved on, and he moved on, and it hasn't been a thing for years now. But yeah, that video kind of goes into why I'm not really... Frankly, at this point in my life, I'm not very interested in being super duper, like, invested in one series-specific fandom anymore. That's just not a thing that interests me at this point in my life, and frankly, I've just had so many negative experiences within those fan cultures that I just don't really want to care that much about one thing that specifically and be that detail-oriented about it. Because that's just not what interests me as a person anymore, and I feel like I have more honest and more critically aware and useful discussions about media when I don't focus on just one thing, and I kind of branch out and talk about things as they stand within a wider culture and a wider framework of, you know, like a medium or, you know, even genre or stuff like that. So yeah, probably not gonna ever really do something like hyper focused like that, like podcast wise. At least nothing long form. Like maybe do like little tiny like dedicated podcasts here and there if an idea ever comes out, like the Y2K thing. But I probably wouldn't ever do like a long form like weekly podcast type thing like Cathedral of Shadows again about just one thing. I don't think I have it in me. Evo asks, favorite game in the Shin Megami Tensei franchise, including branch-offs like Persona. So this is something that won't surprise anyone who's been following me long enough. By far my favorite game in the franchise is Devil Survivor 2. I wouldn't call it the best by any means, but I think that it had a lot of gameplay improvements over the first game that I respect a lot, and it finds the right balance between being really fun and goofy and being really engaging and knowing when to get serious. And also it's like it is unabashedly like ripping off Evangelion in parts, which got to me too. And just it manages to strike a really nice tone of being a really fun game that also isn't afraid to get serious and deal with like actual important stuff when it needs to. And also they have a social link type system called the Fate system in that game, that are just everything is really well written. I love pretty much all the cast members in that game except for like I think like Kata I don't really care about, but everyone else I think is really cool, and just a really good implementation of the alignment system compared to other games too, that was more nuanced and I think was willing to play with the alignments more than other games. So Devil Survivor 2 is always going to have that place in my heart, and it's always going to be my favorite just thinking about it emotionally. When I think about it like super critically and just like in my mind, I think my favorite games that Atlas ever put out is that stretch of games that they released from Nocturne to Digital Devil Saga 2. So Nocturne, DDS1, DDS2. Those three games form this wonderful trilogy that I think Atlas is just on their best game there. Just in terms of the gameplay, the narrative, just everything is just so finely crafted, and I love it. And it creates this very interesting like narrative trilogy that really is interested in exploring what it means to be human, what it means to go through transformation. A lot of stuff about like body horror and whether or not people are casting aside their humanity in service to greater goals, or if they're transcending and becoming something greater than human. And also learning to live with like weird fucked up realities and truths, and how to overcome them, and how to struggle through adversity in a way that allows you to grow and rebel against the bullshit in the world, that I think is just really strong. There's a lot of like creative links between those three games that I think you can like really latch onto, and there's a lot of meat there compared to what would come before and after, in my opinion. If you asked me when I was younger, I think I would have said that I preferred Nocturne of those games. But nowadays, I think I prefer Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2. There's something to be said about Nocturne's aesthetics, and it's a very lonely experience. But it's also one about becoming powerful and casting aside your humanity to become something that is strong enough to break the cycle of bullshit that runs the world and finally create a change that would have a good impact, but at what cost type of deal. And I think that when you're young and pissed off, like that's like a really powerful story to latch onto. As I've gained more life experience, I think I've really started to resonate with Digital Devil Saga more, in the sense that it is about a group of people that get over bullshit together, and learn how to deal with their pasts and themselves, and dealing with each other, to overcome something that just seems insurmountable. And just really fantastic character dynamics and character writing in those two games. And it just tells this fantastic story over the course of both of those entries, that I just really love a lot. And just it has more of an emotional heart to it than Nocturne does. And just a lot more moments of like genuine love and affection in Digital Devil Saga, that just makes it more human to me than Nocturne, which sometimes I think it's a little too distant for its own good, even though I like that game a lot, and I really like the ideological slant to it. I think DDS is grounded in a way that doesn't forget the ideological stuff, but it also takes the time to examine the impact that these ideologies and these events that are happening in the world, it takes the time to examine the impact that would have on people and how they would react, and how they would change from those experiences. So, yeah, Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2 are fucking wonderful games, and Nocturne's good too. Evo also asks, also, have you played the other two games in the Drakengard franchise? I have played them. I have not, like, properly fully beaten both of them, but I have been, at this point, like, properly spoiled on both of them, and, like, I've seen playthroughs and videos, and I know the deal with both of those games. I've experienced them in that way. I just haven't, like, gone through the process of, like, beating them myself. And yeah, I don't really know. I get asked all the time, like, hey, you ever gonna do Drakengard 2? And my only real answer to that is life has changed since that first, like, Drakengard 1 Let's Play, and, like, it's kind of up in the air, and I don't really ever know if Drakengard 2 and 3 are going to get, like, Let's Plays on this channel. I wish I had a more concrete answer for that, but just, I don't know. So, yeah, that's kind of the current status of that. It's kind of question marks, so yeah, who knows? Those might get covered. They might not be, and I'm kind of sorry that I don't really have more of like a concrete footing for answering that. Speaking of Let's Play stuff, Zachary Armstrong asks, can you play Shin Megami Tensei 2 or If for us, please? SMT2 I have been public about saying that I do want to do at some point in the future. Kyoyaku is taking precedent over that, though, for now, just because I'm wrapping up Kyoyaku 1 as we speak. And Kyoyaku 2 is much more closely linked to Kyoyaku 1 than SMT 1 is to SMT 2. So SMT 2 can wait for now, but I do want to do that at some point in the future, I promise. Now, SMT If. That is a game that I played through before it was officially fully, like, hacked and fan-translated, using a translation guide. I kind of did the old hard way. And I think that that game's a little rougher around the edges in a lot of ways than even what I've played of SMT2 and even like SMT1 and Kyoyaku. I just didn't enjoy the act of playing it as much as the other games from that time period. So it's a little harder for me to be enthusiastic about playing that one. Granted, I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff, and obviously SMT If is kind of what led to Persona down the line, so I think looking at it from like a historical perspective that way too could be really interesting. But I don't know, it's hard for me to get excited about the idea, but I do think that it could be a thing that could possibly happen if I get the motivation in the future. And who knows, it could also be a thing too that maybe playing through it without using, like, the translation guide and being able to properly play through it using, like, the fully patched version now, maybe I'd have a better time with it. So I do want to, give it a second chance in that regard, too, now that, I can play through it properly. But SMT2, I'd say, yeah, that'll happen at some point. If I'm kind of on the fence about, it might be a thing that, like, I want to do, but also, if it doesn't happen, I wouldn't be surprised either, just because it could be a little hard for me to find the motivation to do that. Specifically, getting through a few rough patches in that game that I just do not remember liking at all. ViewBob asks, what do you like on your pizza? Honestly, I'm game for pretty much everything that isn't mushrooms or olives. I'm not super, like, selective with what's on my pizza, but I guess I will say I like some onion, I like some green pepper, but really, like, just I'm kind of boring in the sense that, like, sausage pepperoni is my go-to. Canadian bacon's good too. But yeah, honestly, it's kind of whatever I'm in the mood for. I'm kind of game for anything, but sausage pepperoni, just the classic two. I'm good with those. So. Well, I will say, I don't like just plain old regular cheese pizza, because it's like, what the fuck's the point? I mean, it's good, it's still pizza, but, like, it's kind of boring. Like, live a little, I don't know. Ghost Rider asks, hardest SMT game you've played? I don't really know, because I feel like it's super subjective, and frankly, I think it's one of those things that the more experience and the more familiar you get with the SMT series, I think the ones that you start out with and, like, the earlier ones that you play are going to be harder just because you're still kind of learning the ropes. So I don't really think that there is, like, I mean, there are games like Strange Journey and Nocturne that people tend to point to and be like, oh, these ones are really hard, and, like, I think there is some truth and merit to that, but, like, I think it really varies from person to person, and also it kind of varies with how well you manage to, do certain things in certain RPGs. I have talked to a few people that really struggle with like the time management elements of the Persona games, and they think that's really fucking infuriating, and like they just can't do it. But they're fine with like mainline SMT stuff. So I think it really depends on the type of like RPG player you are, and I don't really think that there's like a definitive answer to like hardest SMT game. If I had to go with one personally, I'd say I guess like when I first played hard mode of Nocturne, like that's pretty difficult, but I got through it. I prefer playing through Nocturne on the hardest difficulty. I really like the struggle that causes and just the sense of danger that whole playthrough carries with it. Up until you get to the final dungeon where you just kind of have to grind for money to get those final few like Megatamas and stuff. It's really fun though. So yeah, I guess I'd go with Nocturne hard mode, I guess. Wing Ding Dong says, do you plan on doing LPs for the other SMT games? I'd love to watch you play them all. Well, definitely won't be doing that. I think I kind of tend to lean towards the older stuff, but I've kind of been trying to make it an effort to not super duper confirm any plans that I have that are like set in stone, other than like I guess like Kyoyaku 2 and SMT 2. I've kind of made public like, yeah, I want to do those at some point. SMT 2 is still a ways off. I'm sorry about that, but just I want to take good proper breaks between these games so I don't burn myself out. I mean, there's other SMT games that I definitely like doing proper Let's Plays of. There was a time right after Cathedral of Shadows ended where I tried to do a Digital Devil Saga Let's Play that people were liking, but I deleted the videos because I just did not have the energy for it at that time, and I needed some distance and time away from the franchise. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to do some other SMT stuff in the future. I'm not going to say what because I don't want to make promises and I don't want to bite myself in the ass more by saying like, hey, look forward to this thing, and then it may never end up happening. Like, I mean, I've done that enough to people and I feel really bad about it and probably beat myself up a little too much about it, but what I will say is that I do still really like that this channel is a way for people to experience like weird and niche and kind of older games that a lot of people like are interested in but maybe don't want to play for themselves. I would like to continue that theme and branch out with that in mind. Obviously there's stuff that I want to cover that isn't old and niche and stuff like that. I don't want to limit myself, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to expose to more people that I think is neat, and I would love to share my love for in the form of a like commentated playthrough in the style of my other SMT playthroughs. Also, are there any other classic RPGs you'd like to do an LP on? Yes, but I am also going to shut the fuck up and not say what those are. But do not worry, I do have plenty of RPGs that I would love to play for y'all. But as always, I do want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence and doing a test playthrough of those games before I actually go through and do like a recorded playthrough of it and start talking over it, just because I like to know my shit and be as informative as I can be. Within reason, of course. I obviously get stuff wrong all the time, but there's a lot of really cool RPGs that I wish more people knew about and talked about, and once again, I'd love to share my love of them with y'all. So expect more classic RPG playthroughs in the future. It'll happen, and also some other Let's Plays that'll be happening soon that'll kind of be a little breather session that's going to happen here after Kyoyaku wraps up. Expect some more chill, mainstream type like Let's Play stuff for a bit here as I kind of catch my bearings, but there's going to be fun stuff on the horizon, I promise. So yeah, I fucking love RPGs, don't know what else to say. But also too, like I do want to be open in saying that doing the style of Let's Plays that I do is pretty difficult, and also it is very, very inefficient when it comes to time. I do want to be very open and just let you guys know that often when I do these Let's Plays, when I go through and like record, like a recording session, usually that's like an entire night of my life that's just gone. And a lot of the editing is like an entire weekend of my life that's just gone. So I do my best to hunker down and really get those done when I can, but also like that's the reason for the delays and why it's been hard for me to be timely with these releases, because also, it's really hard for me to spend that much time at once or fit that into my life. And obviously I want to be better with that, especially now that I have the Patreon and people are like kind of paying me for this, and I want to make sure that I'm getting stuff out in a timely manner. Kyoyaku was, it came out faster than the SMT1 Let's Play did, but I mean, it still took way longer than I wanted to, so I'm doing my best to looking at ways to manage my time better and get a better flow going for my workload, but it's really hard, and I'm sorry about that, and I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses, but like, I do have to make like an active decision to sacrifice other parts of my life and like, social stuff and just like personal like peace, like relaxation time, away from work and all that to continue making these Let's Plays. And that's not to say that I don't like enjoy doing them. Far from it. I love doing these Let's Plays. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be here doing this shit if I didn't enjoy it, but it's a commitment, and I want to be better at getting them out faster, and I kind of want to maybe take some time thinking about ways I can do that, and maybe being a little bit better about spacing things out so that when I do start uploading Let's Play stuff, I give myself even more of a buffer than what I thought I was giving myself, because when I went into Kyoyaku, I was like, yeah, there's no fucking way I'm gonna run out of footage, and this will go smooth, and sure enough, life happens, as it tends to do. And it just, it was a mess. So, yeah, really sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know. Hope you all look forward to seeing more stuff from me. I got some cool stuff that's happening, and holy shit, this was almost an hour. Yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna call it a day and stop recording. Thanks y'all for the questions, and I will be back later with more fun-filled videos for y'all. And don't worry, Kyoyaku will be wrapping up shortly.